You can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. California is making progress toward a Medicare for All law. The California Senate voted to approve the bill and send it to the California Assembly. California Nurses Association, National Nurses United, is a big backer of the single-payer Medicare-style system that would cover all Californians. To become law, SB 562 must pass the Assembly, get reconciled between the two houses of the California legislature, and also get Governor Jerry Brown's signature. At least 8 members of the Assembly are co-sponsoring the bill. Roseanne DeMauro, executive director of the California Nurses Association, National Nurses United, says that passage in the Senate was a banner day for California and a moral model for the nation on universal single-payer health care. A team of economists at the Political Economy Research Institute at the University of Massachusetts Amherst studied the economic impact of this Medicare for All bill in California and found that it would cut the out-of-pocket health care costs of middle-income California families by as much as 9%. Business would also benefit from cuts in payroll costs under the bill. The AFL-CIO says pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement is a decision to abandon a cleaner future powered by good jobs. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says it's a failure of American leadership. SEIU President Mary Kay Henry says Trump's decision to take the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord won't stop working Americans from pushing for progress on climate change. Henry said by withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, President Trump and his self-interested political allies are killing the creation of new industries and jobs that could give communities the boost they need to thrive in favor of corporate polluters who want to pad their bottom line on the health of our communities. United Steelworkers President Leo Gerard says President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement is an inexcusable blow to the U.S. economy and signals to domestic innovators and manufacturers that the U.S. will not support them. WIN's Joanne Powers has more labor news.
Donald Trump's proposed budget makes unprecedented cuts that would shift a huge amount of federal spending responsibility onto the states, including a quarter of the cost of the National Food Stamps program for needy families and cuts of up to $1.3 trillion to Medicaid. John Peacock is project director of the Wisconsin Budget Project.
He proposes massive cuts to Medicaid in order basically to fund huge tax cuts for corporations and the very wealthy.
These cuts are incentivizing states to cut services for low-income citizens. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker and the Republican majority in the state legislature are proposing several changes to the state's Medicaid program.
Childless adults who make at least $200 a month would have to pay a premium, having drug testing, and putting a 4-year time limit. Actually, a number of those things would cost more, at least in the short run, because of the amount of bureaucracy involved in making those changes.
WIN is made possible in part by the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a weekend it was. Outside of the fact that Donald Trump visited a golf course in Virginia, second day in a row, 23rd golf course visit in just 19 weeks. Now, this is a guy who said, he's going to work every day. He's never going to leave the White House. He was work, work, work. Bashed Obama almost daily for taking a day off. And yet 23 rounds of golf. I haven't even played 23 rounds of golf in my entire life. And yet the guy's been in office 19 weeks and we've footed the bill for that. And you go, but he owns the courses, Rick. Yeah, he does. But you know how much it costs to get him there? You know how much it costs for Secret Service? You know how much it costs for logistics? Do you know how much it costs in all of the ancillary things that happen? We could probably spend that money to fund, a program to help feed seniors or children, or so we could probably do something better than watch him hack at a little ball and drive around a park. Just a thought. Now, over the weekend, again, you go back and you look at the horrible world in which we live in right now, where it seems almost daily there's something of a terror attack being thrown in our faces. The most recent there in London being three people with knives and blades ramming people in the streets in a van and shot dead on the streets, and good. But you've got a president who thought, well, it's an excellent opportunity to misquote for his own political ideological, and I can't believe I'm saying anything ideological with Trump, but for his own narrow-mindedness. He tweeted out on Sunday, at least 7 dead and 48 wounded in terror attack, and Mayor of London says there's no reason to be alarmed. Now, again, this is one of those things where it must be something that the right puts in their water. I mean, I don't really know, but only reading half the sentence seems to be something conservatives do an awful lot, and I point to the Second Amendment. Here is another one of those examples. The mayor of London was saying, look, we're going to be increasing the number of armed policemen on the streets. You're going to see people walking around with guns, and you're going to see a much greater police, almost militaristic style environment. You're going to be shocked by it, but don't be alarmed because we're just helping you. Now, you could make an argument that that's not a good thing because we don't want to encourage the militarization of our street corners. It's going to happen anyway. But Donald Trump says, there's no reason to be alarmed over the attack. And again, half of the sentence. He goes on to tweet out yesterday that we must stop being politically correct and get down to business of security for our people. If we don't get smart, it will only get worse. And you go, what does that mean, Donald? Look, there are always going to be a handful among us who are going to try and disrupt. Always. And giving them the kind of recruitment tools that these organizations need is just downright dumb. And dividing and going after our allies is even dumber. Now, the mayor's spokesperson put out a response. They said the mayor is busy working with police, emergency services, and the government to coordinate the response of this horrific and cowardly terrorist attack and provide leadership and reassurance to Londoners and to visitors of our city. He goes on to say, the mayor, he has more important things to do than to respond to Donald Trump's ill-informed tweet that deliberately takes out of context his remarks urging Londoners not to be alarmed when they see more police, including armed officers on the streets. Again, you go, this is the leader of the free world. This is the most powerful man in the world. And look, understand, the rest of the world's leaving us behind. And the events of the last several days just solidify that. If you didn't look at the religion tour that Donald Trump went on, as a moment of the rest of the world going, it's time for us to look elsewhere. You look at this response. You look at the response from the French president over pulling out of climate change, over the Paris Accords. And here's the thing that's interesting. And Der Spiegel had a great article on this earlier that I spent a little time with, that basically said all of the foreign leaders were begging Donald Trump with all of the facts on the economy, on disaster, on poor nations and humanitarian fronts, on every possible front, to get him to realize that, this is something that the world has to do. And, like a recalcitrant child, he sat there and listened to very intelligent people make cogent arguments on why this is a good thing and why it's actually probably good for the United States and why American businesses will want to do this. And he still pulled up. Now, we spent the weekend in New York City for the March for Truth. And New York City, the mayor of New York, another one of these climate mayors who's saying, look, we're not going backwards. They can't. And I was looking at the police presence there. The policemen are driving smart cars. The policemen are driving little scooters. They're not driving the big Crown Vics. They don't have the big Harleys. They don't have the big massive machinery. They're on bikes. I don't see them going backward. I just don't see it happening. And I don't see a lot of other cities who have invested, millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into moving forward, going back. I just don't see it. I see this again as a lack of leadership. And more importantly, this has nothing to do with smart policy, has nothing to do with making a deal, has nothing. This has everything to do with Obama put his name on it, and it must be bad. And this administration and the Republican Party, they have staked their entire fortune on anything that Obama's name is on has to go. Regardless of what it would do, regardless of how it works, regardless of how it helps people, has to go. Anything Democrats have done, and you can go back to the beginning, of the New Deal, all of it has to go. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, workers' compensation, unemployment laws, all of that stuff. Rights of workers to organize and strike, all that stuff has to go. Because Democrats have their names on it. And that's it. This is one of those, I look at my kids, this is a very childish thing. My son won't do something because my daughter was doing it. And my daughter won't do something because my son was going to do it. And it's just this constant ridiculous battle of childish will. Now look, my kids have excuses. They're children. You expect that from children. You don't expect that from the leader of the free world. You don't expect that from a 70-year-old man who should know better, but doesn't. And if you look at the tweets and you look at just the ridiculous nonsense that comes out of this administration, we should all be marching in the streets. And to be honest, in New York, there were thousands of people who came out. Now, the right wing tried to dismiss it. Oh, there's 80 people there. No, there were thousands of people in the streets, all wanting the same thing. The truth. We want to know if our leaders are being blackmailed. We want to know if our democracy has been hijacked. We want to know if the people leading our policy, if the people leading, I don't know, how we deal with terrorism, how we deal with international trade, how we deal with our allies, isn't somehow in the pocket of a Russian dictator. And the thing that gets me, and the thing that's really shocking to me, is the number of Trump supporters who are willing to just let that go. Don't care. And in fact, next week on our TV program, I actually interviewed a guy over the weekend who said he doesn't care about what Trump did during the election. Doesn't care if the Russians were involved. Trump won. That's all that matters. That kind of blind allegiance, and I hold that kind of allegiance to no one. Because everyone comes back, well, what about Hillary? Well, if Hillary was proven to commit a crime and she was bought and paid for by the Russians, we've got places for her too. This is not a partisan issue. This is a democratic issue. This is about how do we ensure that the future of this country remains in the hands of we, the people, a nation of, for, and by we, the people. That's the question. and to try and deflect and try and pass blame on someone else and try and to do all of the nonsense of but, I'm not buying it. We need an investigation. We need a commission to look into this. We need answers. We need tax returns. We need information. And we need it now. Because every day this administration is getting worse and worse, and we the people are more vulnerable and going to be much more desperate. And a little bit later on, we'll talk about a couple of reasons why. But here, again, this just shows me that the president, right now, the guy sitting, occupying that Oval Office, not fit for the office at all. And in the next segment, we're going to have Propane Jane come back on and explain, what it is we need to be doing, how we need to be looking at the insanity that's coming out of the White House, and again, where we should be going. Quick break, right back with our good friend Propane Jane. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. For working people on the top.
All of my life I've searched for clarity. I have wrestled with two paths buried deep inside of me. I lost some rounds, been knocked around, felt my share of defeat. Yet somehow I've always managed to get back on my feet.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day that Secretary of State George Marshall delivered a speech at Harvard University. In his speech, Marshall made a call for the United States to send assistance to European countries devastated by World War II. He declared, quote, "The truth of the matter is that Europe's requirements for the next 3 or 4 years of foreign food and other essential products, principally from America, are so much greater than her present ability to pay that she must have substantial additional help or face economic, social, and political deterioration of a very grave character." His speech became the basis for the European Recovery Program, or what became known as the Marshall Plan. The goal of the plan was to boost the morale of the Europeans, while strengthening trade ties between the U.S. and Europe. There was great fear among leaders in the United States that economic instability would cause European countries to turn towards communism. Through the Marshall Plan, the United States sent aid in the form of grants, loans, and technical assistance. Much of the money went to purchase food and manufactured goods produced in the United States and sent to Europe. This demand helped to keep the American economy booming. In all, more than $13 billion in aid was sent to 16 European countries. Some European labor unions objected to American intervention in Europe as part of the plan. This caused contention between different European labor organizations. As some unions affiliated more closely with the communists, others aligned themselves with the West. The Cold War had taken its toll on labor solidarity. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So the golfing thing has caught the attention of several. Again, you look at, to this point, 23 times that we know of, because understand, the Trump staff, not the most transparent. So there may be several times where he was actually playing golf where we said, no, he was somewhere else. But 23 times this president has been on the golf course. Now you compare that and go back to President Obama, who everybody was crazy about. And over 8 years, Obama did play golf about 330 times. You've got 23 times in 19 weeks. You go back to the Obama administration, he played once. So again, and understand, there was a terrorist attack in the world, and he played golf twice over the weekend. So there's your answer. Anyway, the reality is we've got a guy in the White House who's some serious issues. And here to help us work through some of those, our good friend Propane Jane. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So, I look at this kind of obsession that the right has with pointing the finger. And I get this a lot. And I said, you know what? I want people held responsible. I want people to be accountable. And all of a sudden, it's always, well, would you say that for Hillary? Or would you say that for Obama? And the answer is yes, I would.
Yeah, but this is a double standard that we're dealing with, and now that we have their president in this position, he is not being held to the same standard that they held Obama to, and that they would have held Hillary to, or any Democrat for that matter. It's basically anything they do is okay as long as they're a Republican doing it.
Yeah, as long as it meets the ends. And here's the thing: over the weekend we were in New York City for the March for Truth. And I actually met a guy, a Republican, a Trump supporter with a big sign, saying, you lost. And I had a conversation with him where he basically said he didn't care if Russia was involved. He didn't care about anything other than the fact that Trump won.
Yeah, I mean, this is a victory for a lot of people philosophically. After 8 years of enduring on their end President Obama and what they thought to be a disaster, despite all evidence to the contrary, that they had to sit there that whole time and tolerate, his high approval ratings and, how well he was received on the world stage.
That he could complete a sentence, that he didn't use the word tremendous in every third word, that he seemed somewhat articulate and intelligent and didn't say dumb things in front of people. Yeah, I remember those days. I miss them.
Didn't throw temper tantrums and didn't have these, middle of the night Twitter rants. But ultimately they didn't like that guy. And they wanted somebody who was, Trump, unfortunately. And now that he's there, even though the things that he's doing are really very aberrant and I think just off-putting to more and more people by the day, they're just doubling down and they're taking more pride in what he's doing.
Did you see the recent the Politico morning consult polls that basically said, people don't care whether Russia was involved or not. They think this guy's got to go. The people were saying impeachment for I don't care what reason seems to be rising fairly high.
Yeah, I found that fascinating. And I think it says a lot about just human intuition and as we think about behavioral science, the social norms and kind of, criteria that we set up to determine what is a disorder of behavior is based on just kind of general means of interpersonal relations and what we think is like good manners and how you should generally be to other people. And so I think that there are so many things about the way Trump comports himself that are just against everything that like your mom told you, like, the home training, even though you may not have always done it, there's still this like super ego in all of us that says, okay, this is the way I should behave in social settings. which is why most of the time, you don't have these situations happening in public where people are having outbursts or, just emotionally acting out in certain ways. And if it does happen, then it calls the authorities in to sort of figure out what's going on. It's something that our society kind of defines pretty well.
Right. So you mean
and so I think.
So you mean like going in front of, the 9/11 memorial in front of world leaders and then chastising them for not paying, enough into NATO, or, pulling out of the climate deal after all of the world leaders have laid out all of the case scenarios and that kind of stuff? Is that kind of what you mean?
That's exactly what I mean. Shoving somebody to get to the front of the line. I mean, things that we tell our children, you just shouldn't do that. And so I think that even though, like the poll said, that people might not necessarily have a laundry list of impeachable offenses or something that they feel rises to like the level of high crime, they do feel like his behavior is unacceptable. And I think that as this presidency, quote unquote, goes on, and he continues to act out and the disapproval continues to increase, it's just like a vicious cycle, and he behaves even more badly. And so I do think that that ultimately the American people are picking up on that, and also the international community is as well.
Now, let me ask you this, from a psychological standpoint, because I see this as something that conservatives do an awful lot. They read like half a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
They read one portion of a sentence that they go, oh, I agree with that, and the rest of reality they kind of I point to the Second Amendment. You have the right to bear arms. They love that part,
Mm-hmm.
not in the well-regulated militia part. They've forgotten that.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Trump's tweet about you have nothing to worry about. Forgetting about the whole context of don't worry about it because all those armed police are there to protect you, kind of thing. I just
Mm-hmm.
kind of look at this as almost a psychosis, if you will.
I think in a lot of ways it is finding a needle in a haystack that is consistent with their own internal belief system. And so, if you sort of already have a certain belief system, you are more prone to pick out information that supports that idea. And so, for instance, when you see the tweets from Trump in regards to Theresa May, he very much wants some evidence or proof that people are not taking the threat of radical Islamic terrorism seriously enough. And so seeing those words put together, do not be alarmed, his brain automatically switches to, okay, this means that she's not taking this seriously enough, even though all these people just died and there was this big, huge attack, rather than seeing it as, she is informing people that there are going to be, there's going to be an increased police presence, and that you should feel safe, and that we shouldn't give in to what the terrorists want, which is for us to be terrorized and afraid to come out of our homes and afraid of, our neighbors.
Yep.
But he just doesn't see it that way. He wants something to confirm his very Islamophobic stance.
No, I mean, you look at the results, and I mean, the mayor of London saying, look, we're going to put more armed cops on the streets, and you're going to see a lot more people walking around with guns, which is culture shock there. I mean, we're used to it. I think eventually we'd be okay having, a military installation on every street corner, just as long as we felt safe, Jane.
Yeah, we have been conditioned to that. And I actually was reading an article by David Frum in the Atlantic, and he was just sort of pointing out Trump's ignorance of the gun laws in the UK, and the tweets that he sent out about them not having a gun debate in the aftermath. Well, hey, yeah, they're not having a gun debate because they use knives in the UK. They don't have the same unfettered access to guns that we have here, and ultimately the attack, wasn't as bad as a similar attack would be in America, because the terrorists would have access to these high-powered rifles. And so the idea that that somehow their society is going to behave and react in this very fearful, terrified way, I think is what he wants to impart in terms of American public opinion, because he wants to sort of engender support for this crackdown and this very unconstitutional travel ban that he's putting in place.
Right, and it all comes back down to I want to win, so I'm going to use whatever happens in whatever context it is to make my argument that I win.
Yeah, it's about him. It's about capitalizing on that moment to buttress his position. It is not about offering condolences. It is not about being, circumspect and respectful of the victims and respectful of the authorities that are trying to do their job. It's about proving his point, and it's about vindicating himself in the midst of an atmosphere where everybody is sort of like pointing the fingers at him and saying, hey, you're screwing up. And I think in particular with Europe, he just got back from this overseas trip. And I think the take-home message is that they very much were, putting their nose up in the air at him, just sort of going, man, you're really incompetent compared to the last guy. And so I think that this is a way for him to sort of be like, I told you so. I mean, yes, I'm this thug, and yes, I'm kind of brash or whatever, but I'm right,
Is there a point, do you think, that where he has? I mean, I think the pressure is almost too much for him. And now there are some who have told me that no, he's such a narcissist that none of this stuff will affect him. But there have been some reports coming out that he's suffering from some loneliness and he's gaining weight, and all of this stuff is piling up. And look, we're only 19 weeks into this gig. And it's going to get much worse as he continues to make bad decisions. And here with hurricane season coming up and having no one to oversee the agencies that would help in emergencies, this stuff could get really bad really fast.
Absolutely. And I guess my question for the people that say, he doesn't seem to be distressed or he's too narcissistic to feel the impact of what's happening. I always want to know, do y'all look at his Twitter account? Because again, telltale tweets. I think, his tweets are a manifestation of how he's feeling internally. And someone who is a high functioning narcissist can contain a lot of this emotional messiness that actually ends up making that person look weak. The best narcissist, quote unquote, if you can sort of call a narcissist best or worse. And again, I say this because there are narcissists sort of everywhere. It is not rare. They are very commonly found in government. They are very commonly found in business. And the reason why they are successful is because they are able to contain the insecurities and the vulnerabilities such that they don't give themselves away. And Trump is unable to do that for various reasons. And so again, that is why his presidency thus far has been unsuccessful, and why he is not convincing to the people he's supposed to be leading. Is because he is giving away a lot of his internal mood state with these temper tantrums and these tweets and these outbursts that he has in public.
Yeah, I mean, every day I keep coming back to 0 days without being a national embarrassment, because look, the rest of the world is mocking us, and the rest of the world is looking at him and judging us as a country as the ugly American president keeps doing these insane things.
Absolutely. And, my most recent Daily Kos piece that came out yesterday is called American Sociopath. And I think it's one thing to identify like all of these pathological tendencies with Trump, but I think we have to take it a step further as a society and again ask ourselves, why we allowed, obviously, yes, 65 million of us did not vote for him. But again, when you look at the political system and the fact that he rose to this level and that 62 million people did vote for him, it says a lot about the culture and the society around him that's looking the other way at these very antisocial things that he's doing, his lack of remorse, his lack of regard for rules and regulations, his lack of regard for just the rights and feelings of other people. And the fact that there are still so many people who identify with that and agree with that sentiment, it really speaks to, I think, a cultural defect, a socio-political defect in our society. And I think we have to ask more about ourselves and not just about him, because, again, he's 70 years old. We knew this about him way before he ever ran for president.
Yep. No, I mean, you're absolutely right.
So
there was no surprises. There were no surprises with this guy. It was all right there. And there are, as you pointed out, 60-some million people who voted for him.
Yeah. And that see this type of pathology, and not just sort of, it's not just ignoring it or looking the other way. It's actually enabling it and glorifying it, and voting for somebody who body slams a journalist, and being proud of it and going, I want somebody who's gonna, they're asking questions about healthcare. They should be punched in the face. I mean, who really feels that internally.
They were asking for it, Jane. They were asking for it.
Right. And just the sociopathy of that. And it's not just that individual. It is the people who vote for that individual and keep that person in office and donate to their campaigns. And people always say, well, people in general don't like Congress very much, but they love their own representative. Well, their own representative in a lot of districts is someone who displays a lot of sociopathic tendencies, and they are being voted for, and they have a constituency, and that's really an American problem at this point, that I think portends very badly for the future.
Yeah, no, I get a lot of people saying, well, this is the reason we need term limits, and I go, I don't think term limits would solve the problem, because I think you would just end up with crazier and crazier people.
You would end up with it's like, for instance, this Tea Party wave that came in 2010, and everything that's happened since then, is that, it's sort of devolved. I mean, every election, they sort of primary out somebody who is more moderate, than the next sort of really extreme person that they put in there. And even moderate is actually, not necessarily accurate for a lot of these people. But the problem is that, you have a populace that is very isolated, and particularly with the Republican base, is receiving a lot of messages from Fox News and AM radio and this media apparatus that has been put there to feed this ideology, and to get them thinking this way, and ultimately to have them vote this way. And so they are continually voting in representatives that exhibit these very antisocial traits, unfortunately.
So again, it's not just the guy in the Oval Office. It's a reflection of a lot of us here in this country.
Yeah. And I think, just to sort of kind of, I think, bring some humanity to it, and in terms of like my experience with people who are antisocial,